In this video, I'm going to take on the mammoth task of going through every single season of Fortnite and ranking its main form of mobility. Let me just clarify what I mean by that, right? There will be no vehicles and there will be no mechanics on this list. So for example, Chapter 2, Season 5, sand tunneling, right? That will not be on here. It will exclusively be the most popular mobility item from each season of Fortnite, and we're going to put them in a list, ranking them from worst to best. Make sure you guys stay till the end of this video because I promise you there are going to be some takes in this video that are going to have you going right to that comment section and arguing with me. If you go on to enjoy this video, be sure to leave it a like and use code TYFRYZ in the Fortnite item shop. With all that being said, we got a long one ahead of us. Grab a drink, grab some snacks, and let's get right into this. At the number 24 spot, the worst mobility item on this list comes from Chapter 2, Season 6. It is the Spire Jump Boots. I really don't have a ton to say about these. I mean, you guys know I hate Chapter 2, Season 6, but I feel like this is an unbiased opinions, right? I feel like these Spire Jump Boots are genuinely a terrible mobility item. You have to jump 3 times in a row, right? And then after you do that, it activates like a glider redeploy. It's just not good in any situation, right? Fighting, trying to traverse the map, any of it, it's just not good. I think it deserves to be in the very last spot here. And at the number 23 spot is Chapter 1, Season 2, and Chapter 1, Season 3. It's the Impulse Grenade. I mean, look, Impulse Grenades are an absolute classic, right? There's no denying that. There's no denying that these actually just set the standard for every other mobility item, right? They were actually the first ever true mobility item. Although I guess that's not entirely true, and I'll talk about that a little higher up on this list. I mean, I guess they're good for trolling, but besides that, actual mobility and engaging in gunfights, stuff like that, the Impulse Grenades are not really going to help you. At the number 22 spot, I have Chapter 1, Season 4's Bouncer Traps. And I think a lot of you may be confused on this one. Chapter 1, Season 4 had a couple of mobility options, right? It was really the Bouncer Trap, the Impulse Grenade, and the Jetpack. To me, I felt like the Bouncer Trap was the most popular out of the Impulse Grenade and the Jetpack, so I put it here on this list. But if you wanted to make the argument that the Impulse Grenade or Jetpack were the main mobility item of Chapter 1, Season 4, I could see that argument. Bouncer Traps are really cool. I mean, I know they're a fan favorite. They're good for like trick shotting, especially if you can combine them with like a shockwave grenade. You can do some really cool tricks. But in terms of like mobility item, right, getting from point A to point B, I don't know if they're the best. Especially because, like, let's say you're trying to escape from somebody, well, they can just use your bouncer pad, right? I mean, obviously, unless you shoot it out, but a lot of times you're not going to be that forward thinking. And we'll actually see that with a couple of other items on this list, items that are great for traversing the map, great from getting from point A to point B, but you are so prone to getting shot that they had to stay a little bit lower on this list. I do love bouncer traps, though. I would love for them to come back. At the number 21 spot is, I guess, technically your first ever mobility item, although it's not really an item, it's technically a trap, from Chapter 1, Season 1, and Chapter 2, Season 1. That's the launch pad. You know, if I was making this video probably like 6 years ago, this would probably be the number 1 spot, but unfortunately, this item has kind of aged poorly, and it's not even necessarily its fault, right? As players get better at the game and naturally get better aim, better at shooting their weapons, right, the launch pad inherently becomes worse, because now it almost feels like using a launch pad is really a death trap. I mean, look, yes, if you are trying to, like, let's say run from zone or something, you're going to have a tough time finding any items that are going to do better than the launch pad. But if you're trying to, like, escape from a fight, right, or if you're trying to join a fight and you're just gliding in a straight line in the air, you are legitimately a free kill. So again, it really pains me to put the launch pad this low. Like I said, a couple years ago, this would be very high up, definitely in the top 10, but now it has fallen towards the bottom. At the number 20 spot, and this is really what I would consider the first, like, seasonal item on this list, it is Chapter 3, Season 4's Chrome Splash. And as we get deeper and deeper into this video, you will see some more of those seasonal items, right? Those items that were really tied into the theme of its season, and most of the time only was in the game for that season. And the Chrome Splash was exactly that. Chrome Splash really gets ahead of the launch pad in particular because of actually how hard you are to hit while using the Chrome Splash. Of course, you do get like the healing properties, right? But for me, it's the fact that you turned into such a low blob that like was so low to the ground. You know what I'm saying? You could juke right and left, you could dive. It was genuinely hard to hit somebody who had used Chrome Splash. And it's really not too shabby for traversing the map. I mean, you could go decently fast when you were chromed. And I'm not going to act like I like Chapter 3, Season 4. I really didn't. didn't, and I really did not like Chrome Splash, but I'm trying to put all bias aside for this video. I think Chrome Splash is, I guess, decent. My only real complaint about it is sometimes when you would be Chrome, right, you would use the Chrome Splash, you couldn't really use your movement as well as you wanted to. Like, you couldn't tack sprint, right, because you would turn into the Chrome Blob. I hated that. But anyways, at the number 19 spot is Chapter 1, Season 6, Rift to Go. And I got a preface here. I know I said it earlier in the video, but this is a great example of it, right? Shadow Cubes, I believe they were called, or Shadow Stones, were in Chapter 1, Season 6. That was the main form of mobility, but we are only talking about items here, right? No mechanics like that. So in terms of items for Chapter 1, Season 6, it was relatively limited, right? It was basically the Rift to Go, balloons, and I think shockwave grenades. But I definitely do remember Rift to Go's being very prevalent in Chapter 1, Season 6, so that's why I have them for this spot. Of course, this item was introduced in Season 5, and I think it was like really revolutionary when it came out. It was really, really good. But again, this is another one of those items that as time has gone on, it has actually hurt the Rift to Go. It's also basically like useless when you're trying to get away from a fight, right? Let's say you get down to 1 HP, right? You're like, I just gotta go. You pop a Rift to Go. Well, what's gonna happen, right? Your opponent is just gonna hop in the Rift and just trace you, follow you wherever you go, and finish you off. So in my opinion, the only thing the Rift to Go is like really, really good at is basically just rotating to zone, right? Just deploy the glider super high in the air and just kind of hang up there while you glide halfway across the map. If you use it like that, you're really gonna like the Rift to Go. But if you use it to try and get away from a fight, it's basically useless. At the number 18 spot is Chapter 4 Season OG's Grappler. So yeah, the Grappler is an interesting one because of course it was introduced in Season 5, and I was really close to putting it in the Season 5 spot as well. But to me, the Grappler was just so prevalent in Season OG, I really couldn't ignore it. It was like the only main form of mobility in that season. I mean, in Season OG, it was basically Grappler or you were in big trouble. And the Grappler, while yes, being a mobility item, is actually a lot better at like taking advantages in fights, right? Especially taking high ground. I think that's probably what like 90% of the people use the Grappler for, right? You're on low ground in a fight, you pop the Grappler, get all the way up top above your opponent, and give yourself the advantage in that fight, right? Like, I don't really know anybody who uses the Grappler, like uses all 10, 15 uses just to get from like Retail Row to Dusty Divot, right? Nobody really does that. It's more used in gunfights. So it made it a little bit difficult to rank, but of course, this is a mobility item list, and in terms of mobility, the Grappler is kind of lacking. But anyways, at the number 17 spot, and yeah, this is a really interesting one, it is Chapter 1 Season 7's Glider item. And this is a pretty rare item in Fortnite history. It has barely been in the game, but yeah, it essentially just lets you glider redeploy. I remember this thing being like so hyped up back then. It was like the massive deal. You would think it was like the best thing since sliced bread in like the Fortnite universe. It's just funny looking back on it, right, with all the crazy items that we get now. But there's no denying that glider redeploy is always helpful, especially just being able to save yourself from fall damage in really any situation you wanted to. Again, this is another one of those items that if you're trying to get away from a fight, just basically jumping off the top of the building and redeploying your glider is really not going to save you. You're just going to get fried. It's essentially just a launch pad that you could really deploy anywhere, right? That's how I think about gliders, and that's why it's a couple spots higher than the launch pad. And here's what I think is going to be a hot take for this video. At the number 16 spot from Chapter 5 Season 2 are the Wings of Icarus. And Chapter 5 Season 2 was a really tough one to decide on because if you guys remember the Avatar collab, airbending was in this season. But airbending wasn't in the game for long. Wings of Icarus was there from the launch of the game. It was clearly designed for like the Greek mythology type vibe of the season. So to me, Wings of Icarus were definitely the go-to choice for my mobility weapon in Chapter 5 Season 2. So for me, I think it was obvious that Wings of Icarus were going to be the selection for Chapter 5 Season 2. They were absolutely the main mobility item in that season. But I gotta be honest with you, Wings of Icarus really aren't that good. The main thing that kills this item is the fact that the wings, when you deploy them, become part of your hitbox. But again, right, if we were in like a kind of funnel, like a vacuum here where there was nobody shooting you and you just needed to get from one point of the map to the other, Wings of Icarus would potentially be the number one spot. But that's not how Fortnite goes, right? You're always getting shot at by people, especially when you have these giant wings floating in the air. You're making a ton of noise. I just think that this thing was so hyped up in like the first week. I mean, I remember myself, I was like, you gotta get your hands on the wings, right? You can fly around the map, you can dive bomb onto people. But then I think the community quickly found out that, oh wait, the wings are now part of your hitbox, and if you're trying to leave a fight, you're going to get beamed. If you're trying to enter a fight, you're going to get beamed. If you're trying to be anywhere in the air, you're going to get fried. I know some people are going to be like, oh, but Ty, you can dive right, you can dive left. Dude, I don't care. When you got those big wings on you, you're getting beamed out of the air. Anyways, at the number 15 spot is from Chapter 2 Season 4. This was a tough one. I'm going to go with Groot's Bramble Shield. Chapter 2 Season 4 had really a plethora of mobility items, mainly shockwaves and the Silver Surfer's board, of course. But if my memory serves me right, I think Groot's Bramble Shield was the most prevalent. I would consider this the main mobility item of this season. And this is really the definition of like a decent item, right? It's not anything crazy, but it's not terrible. The one thing that's incredible about Groot's Bramble Shield is that you are entirely protected by the Bramble Shield itself, right? The name speaks for it. A lot of the items that have been at the bottom of this list are there because you leave yourself entirely too vulnerable to getting killed, right, while you're using the item. I just talked about that with Wings of Icarus. That is entirely not the case with Groot's Bramble Shield. You get protected and you actually get white heals too, so you get healed while using the item. But that is basically in exchange for, well, the actual mobility itself. You couldn't really go very far with the Bramble Shield. If I remember correctly, it would have like 3 little pulses, and then after that, it would force you to get out of the shield. But on the other side of that, it was an infinite item, right? So as long as you just let it recharge, you were smart while using it. It could be used as a healing item or a mobility item, which is incredibly powerful. I think this is a pretty fair spot for the Bramble Shield. At the number 14 spot are the Shadow Bombs from Chapter 1, Season 8. And my memory might be serving me wrong, but I think Shadow Bombs were also in Chapter 1, Season 9, but I did not count those as the mobility item for Chapter 1, Season 9. We'll talk about that season a little bit further up on this list. But there weren't a ton of options for Chapter 1, Season 8, but honestly, I would have picked Shadow Bombs anyways. This is an incredibly underrated item. I'm just going to say that. I forget what tournament I'm thinking about right now. Someone can let me know in the comment section below, where I want to say it was Mr. Savage, right? Was like all the way at the bottom of zone, no mats, no nothing, popped a Shadow Bomb and bounced like all the way up top of the mountain, got behind the guy and killed him and won the game. You guys know what I'm talking about if you know. They keep trying to introduce invisibility items, right? With Mysterio's stealth medallion, right? Dude, that thing's garbage. That's fake invisibility. This is real invisibility. You are basically entirely invisible. I remember seeing the clips of like people hiding in other people's boxes with the Shadow Bombs. They were really, really good. And honestly, the only reason they're not any higher on this list is because there are just 13 other absolutely stacked mobility items, and I couldn't put the Shadow Bombs any higher, truthfully. At the number 13 spot from Chapter 2, Season 8 is the Icy Grappler. I also do want to give a quick shout out to the Witch Broom, which was also in Chapter 2, Season 8. I think that if you wanted to call the Witch Broom the main mobility item of this season, I think you could do that. But if I remember correctly, I think the Icy Grappler was actually introduced in this season, and it's a kind of weird item. I mean, look, in terms of just straight mobility, right? Of course, there's a lot that goes into a mobility item, right? Not just traveling the map, but in your gunfights, right? Is it helping you take high ground, for example, like the regular grappler does? How quickly can you escape a fight? All that stuff, right? It's not just going from point A to point B. But let me tell you something, if this list was just going from point A to point B, the Icy Grappler could be the number 1 spot. It's incredible at that. The main thing that holds it back is, well, in any other situation that's not getting from point A to point B, the Icy Grappler kind of sucks. Like, think about it, right? If you're trying to engage in a fight with somebody and you use the Icy Grappler to get over to them, that's a terrible idea, right? Because your feet are covered in the ice cubes and you're going to be sliding all over the place. Now, if you had to ask me, I would probably take the regular grappler over the Icy Grappler, but the Icy Grappler just excels so well at traveling the map so quickly. It's got to be higher up on this list. And yeah, that's basically why it's at the 50% mark in this video, right? Because it excels on one spectrum really, really great, and then is on the complete other side of the spectrum where it really, really sucks. At the number 12 spot, we got Chapter 2, Season 2, and that's going to be Sky's Grappler. And I'll be honest with you guys, this is probably the lowest you're ever going to see Chapter 2, Season 2 in any of my lists, and I think there's going to be some disagreement in the comment section below on this pick. Now, it was really between either Sky's Grappler or Crash Pads. If you guys remember, Crash Pads were introduced in this season, and they were used by a lot of people, but to me, Sky's Grappler was by far the more popular item, and I would consider it the main mobility item of this season, right? I mean, if I were to put mobility and Chapter 2, Season 2 in the same sentence, you'd probably think of Sky's Grappler right away. Look, do not get me wrong, this item is absolutely incredible. It's an infinite grappler. I can't complain, right? But I don't know how else to say this. There are literally just 11 other mobility items that I think are better. I also just don't really think of Sky's Grappler as a mobility item. I mean, look, maybe I'm in the minority with that take, right? But I see Sky's Grappler as more of an offensive weapon that is used in gunfights really exclusively. Like, yes, you can traverse the map using using Sky's grappler, but it's not the best at that. I mean, look, it's infinite, right? So of course, if you use the grappler 200 times in a match, yes, you can get from one half of the map to the other, but I don't know. I just think there are better mobility items out there. And one of those items is the number 11 spot, Chapter 5 Season 1's Grapple Blade. You know, I was really torn whether I should put Flowberry Fizz here because yes, while Flowberry Fizz is a healing item, a lot of people would consider it one of the best mobility items ever. But to me, it was obvious that the Grapple Blade was intended to be the brand new shiny toy, right? The main new mobility item of the entire chapter. The reason why I like the Grapple Blade so high up on this list is because it was so versatile. Some people will argue that the Grapple Blade feels clunky, and while I can see that point of view, I actually think you can look at that as a positive. Because I don't know about you guys, but I felt like it was extremely difficult to hit somebody who was going from tree to tree to tree using the Grapple Blade. And if you use it smart, you have an infinite grappler, right? This thing had a certain amount of uses, right, but over time would replenish. You also had an attack ability, which I personally did not use that much, but at close range was a pretty solid melee weapon. It reminded me of like Chains of Hades a little bit. I am a big Grapple Blade fan, and I can see why some people might be upset that I put it this high on the list, but I don't know. I miss the Grapple Blade, right? Bring it back. At the number 10 spot is Chapter 3 Season 3's Nimbus Cloud. And this was kind of a tough season to pick, right? Because there weren't a ton of like really prevalent mobility items this season. To me, it was obviously between the Nimbus Cloud and the Grapple Gloves. But when I went back to the Fortnite wiki and I looked at the utility items this season, the Nimbus Cloud was the first thing that popped up, and it reminded me so much of Chapter 3 Season 3. Everybody had their hands on the Nimbus Cloud when it was in the game, and that's why it's at this spot for Season 3. And I think it's actually entirely deserving of a top 10 spot. Look, the Nimbus Cloud is essentially the glider item, the launch pad, any of those items where you redeploy your glider, but 10 times better. And that's because you can drop out of the sky whenever you wanted to with 0 fall damage. So I remember all the time, right? I would use the Nimbus Cloud, I would be flying in the air with it, somebody would shoot a singular bullet at me, what would I do? I would press RT, just drop straight down to the ground. And this is another one of those mobility items that is technically infinite, right? Of course, it does have a recharge time, but infinite mobility, right? You guys cannot understate that. And since you could just drop out of the sky and take no fall damage, the Nimbus Cloud made for some great offensive plays, right? Because you could sneak up entirely on people, be gliding super high in the air, and just fall down to them, right? Like an angel coming from heaven and just thunder pump them straight in the head. You'll have no idea what hit them. As you can tell, I am a big fan of the Nimbus Cloud. At the number 9 spot is Chapter 5 Season 3's Nitro Fist. If I were making this video on the launch day of Chapter 5 Season 3, this would, with not a shadow of a doubt, be at the number 1 spot. Nitro Fists were entirely broken on the day they launched, and not actually because of the mobility, but because of their attack ability. It had like no cooldown, right? People were just swinging, punching through wall after wall after wall. You could get in anybody's box. Nitro Fists were absolutely broken on launch. They ended up tuning down the attack ability, right? But the mobility still stayed very good. The thing that I like about the Nitro Fist that we haven't really seen up to this point, I mean, maybe the Grapple Blade or any of the grapplers, is the ability to rapidly change which direction you're going in pretty much instantly. And that's what made a player who was good with the Nitro Fist so hard to hit, right? Because they go left, right, left, right. They would just dash, right? And again, I know I've said this so many times, but now that we're getting inside the top 10, you're going to see this a lot. This is an infinite mobility item. To me, the Nitro Fists were a must carry in Chapter 5 Season 3, and so there shouldn't be any surprises here that it's within the top 10. At the number 8 spot is going to be Shockwave Grenades, and I have a laundry list of seasons that I put this for. They were introduced in Chapter 1 Season 5, so obviously I'm going to say they're the main mobility item for that season. But I also said that for Chapter 1 Season 9, Chapter 1 Season X, Chapter 2 Season 5, Chapter 3 Season 2, and Chapter 4 Season 3. If you go back and look through the loopholes, watch the gameplay, Shockwave Grenades were clearly the most prevalent mobility items in all those seasons. And yeah, I don't think there's any surprise that you guys are going to see the Shockwave Grenades within the top 10. I think some of you guys may try and argue that they should be higher, maybe inside the top 5. They are good at literally everything, and in fact, they actually inherently got a massive buff when sliding was introduced in, I want to say, Chapter 3. Same with sprinting, right? Because all you see people do now is they'll throw a shockwave, then they'll start sprinting, which will send you even further, and then once you land, you don't land like flat, right? You land in a slide and you just keep going. Shockwave grenades are arguably like the most infamous mobility item in all of Fortnite, and that's because they're literally good for everything. You take no fall damage. If you're trying to get out of a fight, you throw the shockwave grenade. If you're trying to enter a fight, you could throw the shockwave grenade to get on height. And really, the only thing that holds the shockwave grenades from being higher on this list is the fact that they're limited. If I remember correctly, you can only hold 6 shockwave grenades, and honestly, there's not a lot of time where where you're actually going to find 6 shockwave grenades in a game. But even if you're able to bring like 2, 3, 4 shockwave grenades into endgame, I mean, maybe throw one at the ground, shoot yourself straight in the air, then throw it on somebody at height, knock them into zone. I mean, they're so good. There are so many different ways to use the shockwave grenades, and yeah, again, no surprise to see these this high on the list. And another item that you really shouldn't be surprised to see this high, it's Chapter 5 Season 4 War Machine's hover jets. Now, look, I know they got nerfed, right, and they're not as good as they used to be, but if you go anywhere in Chapter 5 Season 4 right now, if you watch any Chapter 5 Season 4 content, I mean, just go look on YouTube right now. I'm sure you guys have been playing the game. Everybody is saying you gotta have War Machine's hover jets. In terms of like crutch mobility items, right, those mobility items that you essentially have to be competitive in the season, I think War Machine's hover jets are really, really high up there. And any item that essentially acts like a crutch, right, where like you need to have it, is obviously going to be high up on this list. And War Machine's hover jets are not really that high on this list because of the actual mobility aspect. I mean, yes, I know there's a couple exploits, right, where you can like slide, crouch, and then use the hover jets and do that over and over again and go flying. And yes, it is technically an infinite jetpack, although it has that timer that runs out and it needs to like kind of refuel. It is incredibly overpowered in gunfights, and that is what really pushes it so high. I mean, you guys are seeing it, right? If you're playing this season, if you go against a player who knows how to use War Machine's hover jets, you can dash right, left, forward, back, pair Captain America shield. In no build, these things are an absolute demon. They've been broken since day one. They're trying to nerf them, but they're still extremely prevalent in the current season. But anyways, at the number 6 spot is Chapter 4 Season 4's Rocket Ram. And what a fun mobility item. If I was ranking this list strictly on fun items, yeah, Rocket Ram would be number 1. Again, just another really versatile item. My only real complaint that I can say with the Rocket Ram is you are kind of a sitting duck while you're waiting for like the rocket to actually load up, right? And you are kind of slow moving through the air to an extent. It was a super sick item, and I think this is actually a pretty high skill gap weapon. I mean, you could really tell when somebody was really good with the Rocket Ram and knew what they were doing versus somebody who was just trying to like fly straight through your builds just to break them, right? I do think the Rocket Ram deserves to be up here. Maybe not this high. I mean, I think you could argue that the War Machine's hover jets could be ahead of it. But again, I think this is another one of those items, especially in, what was it, Chapter 4, Season 4, right? Where it was just such a crutch item. You had to have the Rocket Ram. At the number 5 spot from Chapter 2, Season 3, I'm going to put Kit's Shockwave Grenade Launcher. And to me, Chapter 2, Season 3 was either between, well, Kit's Shockwave Grenade Launcher or Jules' Glider Gun. But obviously, I decided to go with the Shockwave Grenade Launcher. I mean, it's literally shockwave grenades, but you can carry more and it's better. So obviously it has to be ahead of the regular shockwave grenades, which it is. I mean, it's really just such a cool item, right? It's literally like they took one of the best mobility items, decided to say, hey, look, let's just put them in grenades so that you can just shoot shockwave grenades wherever you wanted to. And let's just act like that's balanced. The thing that I think made it so strong is the fact that it didn't use like actual shockwave grenades as its ammo. It actually used rockets as its ammo. And as you guys know, rockets are a lot easier to find than shockwave grenades. And as some of you guys also know, Chapter 2, Season 3, the majority of that map was totally flooded underwater, so having a big mobility item like the Kit's Shockwave Grenade Launcher was essential, and it gave you a massive boost over the rest of the lobby. And we have now reached the number 4 spot. These top 4, honestly, I think you could make an argument any one of them should be at the number 1 spot. They are all insane mobility items, and to me, clearly head and shoulders above the rest. Definitely the 4 best mobility items we've ever seen. But that number 4 spot comes from Chapter 2, Season 7. It's the inflatable. I've talked about this item so many times in my last couple of videos, so I'll keep this quite brief here. You turn yourself into a literal bull, a hovering inflatable cow. And as much of like a meme kind of troll funny item, it is actually really, really good for mobility. The thing that I think it kind of lacks over some of the other items on this list is really just the versatility. Like you'll see with the top 3, you are able to use those weapons and items in literally any scenario and they will help you out entirely. But with the inflatable, I can't necessarily say that's the case, but since it does such an exceptional job at traversing from point A to point B, while also protecting you, might I add, I mean, the velocity you could get on this thing, you get like 4 to 5 bounces down a hill, you will go flying, and I'm sure the gameplay will show it. Yeah, I mean, for me, you can make the argument this should be the number 1 spot. And I think you can make the same argument for the number 3 3 spot coming from Chapter 3 Season 1, that is Spider-Man's web shooters. At the time, Spider-Man's web shooters were the best mobility item in Fortnite history. Obviously, I don't really think that's the case anymore, but they are just so good. I'm like running out of items to say, right? Because they all kind of do the same thing. They all just try and get you from point A to point B the quickest. But Spider-Man's web shooters were so unique at the time, right? They like basically paved the way for ODM gear, which hint, hint, we haven't seen yet. But guys, just like the mechanics, like the physics, the way this thing felt when you were flying through the air from tree to tree, swinging like Spider-Man was an awesome feeling. And I actually genuinely remember in the beginning of Chapter 3 just being so pissed off at the web shooters, right? Because they were a third-party nightmare because you could get anywhere you wanted to so quickly that as soon as people heard any shots in the air, everyone would just use their web shooters and would flock to it. To me, this is a clear, easy top 3. There is no argument about Spider-Man's web shooters being this high. At the number 2 spot, and guys, this was almost the number 1 spot. It was so difficult to not put it there. It's Chapter 4 Season 1's Shockwave Hammer. And for better or for worse, the Shockwave Hammer really like basically plagued the entire season. This to me is truthfully one of those items that you had to have in endgame or else you were at a significant disadvantage. There's no other way I can put it. It doesn't even have to just be endgame. If you are going up against someone that has a Shockwave Hammer and you do not, I'm gonna say like 75% of the time you're gonna lose that fight. I mean, the Shockwave Hammer was just that good. And you want to talk about crutch items, this is the number 1 best crutch item potentially in all of Fortnite. Dude, like the sound of the Shockwave Hammer bouncing around the map, like I still hear it right now while I'm talking. Like some of you may think I'm going absolutely insane, which I probably am, but like I genuinely mean it, right? Like if you guys ever played Chapter 4, this thing just terrorized the entire season. And to me, it's quite clear why it has never come back, and it probably will never come back. It was way too strong. Not only that, but the hammer had a massive exploit, which to my knowledge, I don't think it ever actually got patched, but it was basically you would slam the hammer down and then you would drop it out of your inventory as soon as you would slam, and that would basically cancel the long effect that would happen when your hammer was like stuck in the ground, right? It took a while to pull it out. Well, this exploit would totally get rid of that, and so you had people that were just slamming the hammer, dropping it, getting rid of that animation, and then they would just keep smacking you with the hammer. With even how broken it was, I still think the Shockwave Hammer is one of my favorite items of all time. It is definitely in my top 5 favorite items I've ever used in this game. But at the number 1 spot here, guys, I don't think it's going to be any surprise. It is Chapter 4 Season 2's Kinetic Blade and the ODM gear. Guys, there was just no way that I could pick one or the other for Chapter 4 Season 2. They were both fan favorites in their own right. They were both used to basically the most extent that they possibly could be used to. Everybody had either a Kinetic Blade in their inventory or the ODM gear for the short time that it was in the game in their inventory. I simply could just not put in one without including the other, and so yeah, they're both here at the number 1 spot. You want to talk about the mobility meta in Chapter 4 Season 2. I cannot believe we got both of these items in the same season. I'm just gonna say it now, Chapter 4 Season 2 is a criminally underrated season. I mean, let me just talk about the Kinetic Blade first, then I'll get into ODM gear. I mean, what a creative idea first. Let's just talk about this. It was like a katana, right? Like a sword that you could dash through the air with, and you could also use it like a melee weapon. Of course, in a season with the Havoc Pump Shotgun, would I recommend using a melee weapon? Absolutely not. But this may just be the most versatile item on this list. Let me just rack off some of the good parts about the Kinetic Blade. 1, it was an infinite mobility item, so it checks that box, right? Also, the dashes, similar to the Nitro Fist, which we talked about before, were so quick in either direction that it almost became impossible to hit somebody who was using the Kinetic Blade, which was good for exiting a fight or really good for entering a fight. You also took no fall damage when using the Kinetic Blade. There were multiple augments that could be paired with the blade to make it even better, and of course, as I said earlier, you could use it as a melee weapon too. These things were all over the map, and the only negative that I can really think about for the Kinetic Blade is that you had, similar to the Rocket Ram, like that slow charge up where you were basically a sitting duck for like a second or two before you actually used the blade. But okay, right? Enough of the Kinetic Blade. I'm sure a lot of you guys are here for the ODM gear. And as I said said earlier, I think it was pretty clear that the mechanics and the physics they used for these Spider-Man web shooters really paved the way for the ODM gear. And I mean, look, like, I felt like they really perfected the mobility when it came to the ODM gear. I genuinely do not have a complaint about the ODM gear. The only thing that I could potentially complain about is the fact that it wasn't unlimited, but it is good in literally every single aspect. I think it is probably the best mobility item that's ever been in this game. I mean, right, we've seen items on this list that are incredibly good on one spectrum, but then so bad on the other. And what I mean by that is, like, they might be really, really good at traversing the map, but they may be really, really bad in a gunfight, right? But the ODM gear is just good at everything. It's good at engaging in a fight. It's good at disengaging in a fight. It's good at traversing the map. It's good at attacking people because you had that sick, like, grapple ability where you could smack people in the face, right? Man, I pray that one day we will get to use the ODM gear again. I feel so bad for anybody who did not play Chapter 4 Season 2 and did not get the ability to use the blade and the ODM gear, although I guess the kinetic blade was in Chapter 4 Season 4. But yeah, they are our #1 spot on this list. All right, guys, I am tired from recording that video. That was an absolute doozy of a video, but if you guys are listening to this and you stayed till the end, thank you so much. Let me know in the comment section what you guys think about this video. Do you agree with some of my takes? What items would you switch around and where would you place them? This list is so hard to make, and I implore you guys to try and make it yourself and see where you would put certain items. If you guys went on to enjoy this video, be sure to leave it a like. Stay tuned for more big videos like this because I promise you I have many other big projects in the works. But with all that being said, I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.